Sister's call. I sold your old cottage for $12K. The words came through the phone like a punch to the gut. My hands trembled as I gripped the receiver tighter, my knuckles turning white. $12,000. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like she was telling me about her grocery run. But that cottage? That cottage wasn't just property. It was everything. Every memory of Mom, every summer we spent there as kids, every promise I made to keep it in the family. And she sold it. Just like that. How could she do this? How could my own sister betray me like this? And why was she calling me now, 3 weeks after the fact, like it was no big deal? If you're here listening to this story, please stay with me. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to shake you to your core. I should probably back up and explain how we got here. How my sister Claire and I went from being inseparable best friends to this. To a phone call that would change everything. It started 6 months ago. Though honestly, the seeds were probably planted years before that. I just didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I was sitting in my small apartment in Seattle, staring at the rain streaking down my window when my phone buzzed. It was early evening, and I'd just gotten home from my shift at the hospital. I'm a nurse, have been for 8 years now. The work is exhausting, but it's honest work. It pays my bills. It keeps me going. The text was from Claire. We need to talk about the cottage. Call me when you can. My stomach dropped immediately. The cottage. Our family's cottage up in the San Juan Islands. The place where Mom spent her last good summer before the cancer took her. The place she made me promise, literally made me promise on her deathbed, that I would never let go of. Keep it, Amber, she'd whispered, her hand cold in mine. No matter what happens, that place has our family's heart. Promise me, and I had promised. Of course I had. But here's the thing about that cottage, it was complicated. Legally complicated? Mom had left it to both of us in her will. 50-50, equal shares. At the time, 3 years ago when she passed, Claire and I had agreed we'd never sell it. We'd both loved that place. We'd both cried when we scattered Mom's ashes in the garden there, so why was she texting me about it now? I called her back immediately. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Amber, she said, and her voice had that tone, that careful, measured tone that meant she was about to say something I wouldn't like. What's going on with the cottage? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. My heart was already racing. Okay, so don't freak out, she began, which is universally the worst way to start any conversation. But David and I have been talking, and we really think we should sell it. David, her husband. I'd never particularly liked David, though I'd tried for Claire's sake. He was a real estate developer, the kind of guy who saw dollar signs where other people saw memories. He wore expensive suits and drove a BMW and always talked about maximizing assets and smart investments. Sell it? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire, we agreed. We promised Mom. I know, she said quickly. But Amber, be realistic. Neither of us uses it. When was the last time you were even up there? She had me there. It had been almost a year. Between my work schedule and my tight budget, getting up to the islands wasn't easy. But that didn't mean I didn't care about it. That didn't mean I wanted to let it go. That's not the point, I said. It's Mom's place. It's our family's place. It's a financial drain, Claire countered. And now I could hear David's influence in her words. The property taxes alone are killing us. And the maintenance? Amber, the roof needs repairs. The dock is falling apart. We're hemorrhaging money on a place we never visit. So we fix it, I said desperately. I can help with the costs. With what money? Claire interrupted, and there was an edge to her voice now. You're barely scraping by as it is. No offense, but you can't afford to help maintain a second property when you can barely afford your rent. The words stung because they were true. I'd been struggling financially for the past year. Medical debt from a surgery I'd had. Student loans that never seemed to shrink. The cost of living in Seattle that kept climbing while my salary stayed the same. But still, the cottage was sacred. I don't want to sell it. I said firmly. Claire, I promised Mom, we both did. There was a long pause. Then she sighed. Look, I didn't want to do this over the phone, but David and I have already talked to a real estate agent. We're going to list it next month. You can't do that without my permission, I said, panic rising in my throat. I own half of it. Actually, Claire said, and her voice went even more careful. We talked to a lawyer about that. If one owner wants to sell and the other doesn't, there's this thing called a partition action. Basically, the court can force a sale. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. You'd take me to court? Your own sister? I don't want it to come to that, she said. That's why I'm calling. I'm hoping we can agree to this. David found a buyer who's interested. Someone who wants a vacation property in the islands. They're offering $12,000. We could split it, $6,000 each. That would help you out, right? With your bills? $12,000. For a property that had been in our family for 30 years. For the place where we'd learned to fish with Dad. Where we'd had bonfires on the beach. Where Mom had taught us to identify every constellation in the summer sky. That's insulting, I said, my voice shaking. Claire, that property is worth way more than that. The land alone. It's not, though, she interrupted. We had it appraised. The cottage is old. It needs major repairs. The location is remote. $12,000 is actually a fair offer given the condition. An appraisal. They'd had it appraised. Without telling me. Without including me in any of these decisions. I need to think about this, I said. Don't think too long, Claire replied. The buyer wants to close quickly. I need an answer by the end of the month. She hung up before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, memories of the cottage flooding through my mind. I thought about the summer I was 10 and Claire was 8, when we'd found that old rowboat washed up on the shore and spent weeks fixing it up. I thought about the time we'd gotten caught in a storm and Mom had made us hot chocolate while we watched the lightning from the big bay window. I thought about Dad, who died when I was 15, and how he'd built that dock himself, board by board, because he wanted us to have a place to fish. How could I let that go? How could I let someone else own our family's history? But how could I stop it? I didn't have money for lawyers. I didn't have money for anything. And if Claire forced a partition action, I'd lose the cottage anyway, and probably end up in debt from legal fees. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I would agree to the sale, but I would go up to the cottage one last time first. I needed to say goodbye properly. I needed to walk through those rooms one more time, to sit on that dock, to make peace with losing it. I called Claire that morning. She sounded relieved when I told her I'd agree to the sale. But I want to go up there first, I said. One last time. Before we sign anything. Of course, she said, and she actually sounded sympathetic. Take your time. The closing isn't until next month anyway. I'll text you the lawyer's contact info for the paperwork. Are you going to come up too? I asked. To say goodbye? There was a pause. I already went up last week, actually. David and I drove up to take pictures for the listing. Something about that felt wrong. She'd already been there. She'd already walked through it, already started the process of letting it go. And she hadn't invited me, hadn't even told me, but I pushed the feeling aside. Maybe I was just being oversensitive. Maybe this was hard for her too, and she'd needed to process it alone first. Okay, I said. I'll try to get up there next weekend. Sounds good. And Amber? She paused. I know this isn't easy, but I really think it's the right decision for both of us. Getting time off work wasn't easy, but I managed to swap shifts with another nurse. The following Saturday morning, I packed a small bag and started the long drive north. It took almost 4 hours, a ferry ride across the Sound, then winding roads through dense forest, then finally the narrow gravel drive that led to the cottage. When it came into view, my breath caught in my throat. It looked exactly the same. The weathered cedar siding, the green metal roof, the stone chimney that Dad had been so proud of, the overgrown garden where Mom had planted roses and lavender, the old tire swing still hanging from the big oak tree in the yard. I parked and just sat there for a moment, overcome with emotion. This was really happening. This was really the last time I'd be here as an owner. I got out and walked slowly to the front door. The key was where it had always been, hidden under a loose board on the porch. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. That particular combination of cedar and salt air and old books that was uniquely this place. The furniture was still covered in dust sheets. The big stone fireplace dominated the living room. Family photos still hung on the walls. I walked through slowly, touching everything. The kitchen where Mom had taught us to make her famous blueberry pancakes. The small bedroom where Claire and I used to share a bunk bed. The screened-in porch where we'd spend entire afternoons reading and listening to the waves. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. Everything except for one thing. In the master bedroom, Mom and Dad's old room, there was something new on the dresser. A folder. A thick manila folder with papers inside. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. What I saw made my blood run cold. Property appraisal documents. But not the ones Claire had mentioned. These were different. These were dated from 2 months ago, long before she'd called me about selling. And the appraised value on these documents? $3.9 million. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. But no, there it was. Due to recent development in the area and the property's waterfront, location and its size, nearly 5 acres, the cottage, was worth $3.9 million. Not 12,000. Not even close to 12,000. $3.9 million. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. I sat down hard on the bed, trying to process what I was seeing. Claire knew. She had to have known. This appraisal was in the cottage, which meant she'd been here, she'd seen it. And yet she'd told me it was worth 12,000. She'd said they'd had it appraised and that was the fair value. She'd lied to me. She'd deliberately, knowingly lied to me, but why? Why would she? And then it hit me. David. David, the real estate developer. David, who knew a buyer. David, who probably was the buyer, or was working with someone who was, planning to flip the property for millions. They were trying to steal my inheritance. My own sister was trying to cheat me out of nearly $2 million. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I finally stopped shaking enough to stand, I took out my phone and photographed every page of that appraisal. Then I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it. They couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. I needed time to think. I needed to figure out what to do. I walked down to the dock in a daze. The water was calm today, almost glassy. I sat at the edge, my feet dangling over the side, and I cried. I cried for Mom, who'd trusted us to take care of this place. I cried for the sister I thought I had who apparently didn't exist. I cried for myself for being so naive, so trusting, so stupid. How long had she been planning this? Had she and David schemed about it together? Had they laughed about how easy it would be to fool me? The worst part was that I'd almost fallen for it. I'd been about to sign those papers. Another few weeks and it would have been over. I would have sold my half of a multi-million-dollar property for $6,000 and never known the truth. As I sat there, my phone rang. It was Claire. For a moment, I considered not answering. But I needed to act normal. I needed her to think nothing had changed. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, are you at the cottage?" she asked brightly. "Yeah, I just got here." "How does it feel?" "Bittersweet, I bet." "Bittersweet?" "Sure, that was one way to describe finding out your sister was trying to rob you." "Yeah," I said. "Lots of memories here." "I know. But Amber, I really think we're making the right choice. That $12,000 is going to help both of us. And honestly, the place needs so much work. Whoever buys it is going to have to sink a fortune into it." Every word out of her mouth was a lie. The appraisal had noted that while the cottage itself was old, it was structurally sound, and the land was the real value. The buyer wouldn't need to sink a fortune into anything except maybe cosmetic updates. They'd be getting one of the most valuable waterfront properties in the San Juans for pocket change. "Listen," Claire continued, "David actually wants to move the timeline up a bit. The buyer is getting anxious. Can you come down to the city next week to sign the papers? We could do it at the lawyer's office. Get it all taken care of? They wanted to rush me. Of course they did. The faster they could get my signature, the faster they could steal my inheritance. Sure, I heard myself say. Next week works. Perfect. I'll set it up and text you the details. You're the best, Amber. I know this isn't easy, but it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. The words rang hollow in my ears. After I hung up, I sat on that dock for another hour, watching the sun start to sink toward the horizon. I thought about confronting her, about calling her right back and demanding the truth. But something stopped me. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny it. Or she'd come up with some explanation. Or worse, she'd accelerate the timeline even more. Maybe try to force the sale before I could stop it. No, I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. I drove back to Seattle that night with my mind racing. Over the next few days, I barely slept. I researched real estate law. I read about partition actions and fraudulent conveyance and breach of fiduciary duty. I learned that as co-owners of the property, Claire and I each had a responsibility to act in good faith toward each other. By lying about the value and trying to trick me into selling, she was violating that responsibility. I also started looking for lawyers. The problem was I couldn't afford one. The few consultations I could get were discouraging. Fighting this would cost money I didn't have, and there was no guarantee I'd win. But I had to try. I couldn't just let this happen. 3 days before the scheduled meeting at the lawyer's office, I got another call from Claire. "Change of plans," she said, and something in her voice made my stomach drop. "The buyer wants to close earlier." "Like this week?" "Tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow," I repeated. "Claire, I can't just— I know it's sudden, but they're offering an extra $1,000 if we can close quickly. That's $6,500 for each of us instead of $6,000. Come on, Amber, it's literally free money." "Free money?" "Sure. If you ignored the fact that my share was actually worth $1.95 million. I don't know if I can get off work," I said. "Please," she said, and now there was an edge of desperation in her voice. "Please, Amber, this is important. David already has everything arranged. The lawyer can meet us tomorrow at 3. It'll take like 30 minutes. In and out. David already has everything arranged." "Of course he did." "Fine," I said. "I'll be there. Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. I'll text you the address." After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. They were panicking. Something had spooked them. Maybe they were worried I'd find out the truth. Maybe they just wanted this done before anything could go wrong. Either way, I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called in sick to work. I put on my best professional outfit, the navy blazer and slacks I usually saved for important occasions. I printed out all the photos I'd taken of the real appraisal. And then I drove to the address Claire had sent me. It was a law office in downtown Seattle, in one of those gleaming glass buildings that screamed expensive. I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Claire was already there in the waiting room. So was David, looking smug in his designer suit. And there was another man, older, silver-haired, wearing an even more expensive suit. The lawyer, presumably. "Amber." Claire jumped up and hugged me. I forced myself to hug her back, even though my skin crawled at her touch. "You made it!" "Thank you so much for doing this." "Of course," I said, my voice hollow. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, he introduced himself, ushered us into a conference room. There was a stack of papers on the table already prepared. All I had to do was sign. "This should be very straightforward," Mr. Henderson said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "We have all the documents ready. Miss Claire and Mr. David have already reviewed and signed everything. We just need your signature, Amber, and we can proceed with the sale." I looked at Claire. She was smiling at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something brittle about her expression, something nervous. David was leaning back in his chair, looking bored, like this was just another Tuesday transaction for him. Mr. Henderson slid the papers across the table to me. "If you could just sign here and initial here." I picked up the pen. My hand was steady now. All the fear, all the hurt, all the betrayal. It had crystallized into something cold and hard inside me. Actually, I said, setting the pen down, before I sign anything, I have some questions. Claire's smile faltered. Questions? Amber, we've been over all of this. Who did the appraisal? I asked, looking directly at Mr. Henderson. He blinked. I'm sorry? The property appraisal. Who conducted it? What company? Mr. Henderson glanced at David, who sat up straighter in his chair. That was handled on our end, David said smoothly. A colleague of mine did us a favor. Why? Because I want to see it, I said. The appraisal report. Before I sign anything, I want to see the documentation showing that the cottage is only worth $12,000. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Claire let out a nervous laugh. Amber, come on. We already told you. Show me the appraisal, I repeated, my voice firm. David and Claire exchanged a look. It was brief, but I saw it. Panic. I don't have it with me, David said. It's at home. That's fine, I said. We can wait while you go get it. I'm not signing anything until I see it. Amber, what is this? Claire's voice had gone sharp. Why are you being difficult? We're trying to help you. This money could really help me? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You want to help me? I pulled the printed photos from my bag and slammed them on the table. Then explained this. The silence in that conference room was deafening. Claire's face went white as she stared at the papers I'd thrown on the table. David's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching near his temple. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, confusion evident on his face as he reached for the documents. What is this? He asked, flipping through the pages. That, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, is the real property appraisal, dated 2 months ago, conducted by Wallace & Associates, a licensed appraisal firm, and according to this official document, our family cottage isn't worth $12,000. It's worth $3.9 million. The number hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Mr. Henderson's eyes widened as he read through the appraisal. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like anger. He turned to David and Claire, his professional composure cracking. Is this accurate? He demanded. David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked speechless. Claire found her voice first. Amber, where did you get that? That's private property. You had no right to private property? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was sitting on the dresser in the cottage. The cottage I own half of? The cottage you were trying to trick me into selling for pocket change. We weren't tricking you, Claire said, but her voice was shaking now. That appraisal, it's just one estimate. David had a different appraisal done that showed. Show me, I interrupted. Show me this other appraisal. Right now, because I'm guessing it doesn't exist. David finally spoke, his voice cold. You need to calm down, Amber. You're making a scene. A scene? I turned on him. You tried to steal $2 million from me and you think I'm making a scene? You manipulated my sister into helping you commit fraud, and I'm the one who needs to calm down? Fraud is a very serious accusation, Mr. Henderson said quietly, and I noticed he'd moved the documents away from David and Claire, closer to himself. His expression had gone carefully neutral, the look of a lawyer who'd just realized he might be caught up in something illegal. It's not an accusation, I said. It's a fact. They lied about the property value to get me to sell my half for a fraction of what it's worth. That's fraud. That's criminal. Claire stood up abruptly, her chair toppling backward. You don't understand. You don't understand anything. We needed this, Amber. David's business is struggling. We have debts. So you decided to rob me? My voice rose. I'm your sister, Claire. I trusted you. Mom trusted you. At the mention of Mom, Claire's face crumpled. For a second, I saw real guilt there, real pain. But then David stood too, putting his hand on her shoulder, and her expression hardened again. Your mother left that property to both of you, David said. Claire has every right to want to sell her half. If you can't afford to buy her out, then at fair market value, Mr. Henderson interrupted, his voice sharp. If one co-owner wishes to sell and the other wishes to buy, it must be at fair market value, not at a fraudulently reduced price. He gathered up the papers I'd brought, aligning them into a neat stack. I'm going to need to consult with my senior partners about this situation. This meeting is over. Wait, David said. The meeting is over, Mr. Henderson repeated, and there was steel in his voice now. I will not be party to what appears to be an attempt to defraud Ms. Amber of her rightful inheritance. You should both consult with separate legal counsel, immediately. He stood and left the room, taking the appraisal documents with him. It was just the three of us now, me standing on one side of the table, Claire and David on the other. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. How could you? I whispered. How could you do this to me? Amber, please, Claire said, and now there were tears streaming down her face. Please, just listen. We were going to give you your share. Eventually, once the property sold for the real value, we were going to… Liar, I said flatly. You were never going to tell me. If I hadn't found that appraisal, you would have taken everything. You would have let me sign away my inheritance for $6,000 and never said a word. We're family, Claire sobbed. We can work this out. We're not family anymore, I said, and the words felt like they were being torn from my chest. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard David mutter something to Claire, his voice low and angry. I didn't stop to hear what it was. I couldn't be in that room anymore. I couldn't look at my sister's face and see a stranger wearing her skin. The next 72 hours were a blur. I contacted a lawyer, a real estate attorney named Patricia Gomez, who'd been recommended by a colleague at the hospital. She agreed to take my case on contingency, which meant she wouldn't get paid unless we won. That was the only reason I could afford her at all. Patricia was a sharp woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. When I showed her the appraisal documents and explained what had happened, she didn't waste time with platitudes or sympathy. She just got to work. This is fairly straightforward, she said during our first meeting. Your sister and her husband attempted to defraud you. We have documentation proving they knew the real value of the property and deliberately misrepresented it to you. We can file for an injunction to prevent any sale of the property until this is resolved. How long will that take? I asked. Months, potentially. Maybe longer if they fight it. But Amber, she looked at me seriously, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Family law cases always are. But when you add real estate fraud into the mix, your sister is going to fight back. Hard. She wasn't wrong. 3 days after the disastrous meeting, I received a letter from Claire's lawyer. Not David's lawyer. Claire had gotten her own attorney. That should have been a red flag right there. The letter claimed that I had misunderstood the situation, that the $12,000 offer had been for Claire's half only, and that I was free to keep my half of the property. That there had been no fraud, just a miscommunication. It was such obvious backpedaling that it would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Patricia fired back with our own letter, including copies of the real appraisal and threatening criminal charges for fraud if they continued to pursue the sale. That's when things escalated. Claire started calling me, constantly, 10, 15 times a day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. Amber, please, we need to talk about this. Amber, you're destroying our family over money. Is that really what you want? Amber, David made a mistake. He didn't mean to. Please just call me back. Amber, I'm begging you. We're going to lose everything. Please. I listened to each one and deleted it without responding. I didn't trust myself to talk to her. I was afraid of what I might say. I was afraid I might forgive her before she actually deserved it. Then the emails started. Long, rambling messages where Claire tried to rewrite history. She claimed David had gotten bad advice from a colleague. She insisted they'd never meant to cheat me. She said I was remembering things wrong about what she'd told me on the phone. She even had the audacity to suggest that I was being greedy by not wanting to split the $12,000. I forwarded every email to Patricia without reading them all the way through. She's building a defense, Patricia explained. She's trying to create a paper trail that contradicts your version of events. Don't respond to anything. Don't engage. Every word you say to her can be used against you. But the worst part, the part that actually broke my heart, was when I got a call from Aunt Linda. Aunt Linda was Mom's older sister. She lived in California and we didn't see her often, but she'd always been kind to us. She'd been at Mom's funeral, had held both Claire and me while we cried. I'd always thought of her as someone I could trust. "Amber, honey," she said when I answered, her voice dripping with concern. "Claire called me. She's very upset. She told me what's happening with the cottage." My stomach sank. "What did she tell you?" "Well, she said that you and she had agreed to sell the property, but now you're trying to back out and you're accusing her of terrible things. She said you're threatening to take her to court, that you're trying to destroy her financially." "Honey, is this true?" I closed my eyes, of course. Of course Claire was playing the victim. Of course she was recruiting family members to her side. "Aunt Linda," I said carefully, "did Claire tell you that she tried to get me to sell my half of the cottage for $6,000 when it's actually worth almost $2 million? There was a pause. She said there was some confusion about the appraisal. "Confusion," I repeated. "Right. Did she mention that she had the real appraisal and deliberately hid it from me? Did she tell you that she and David were going to steal my inheritance?" "Amber, that's a very serious accusation. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Claire would never—" "She did," I said flatly. "I have proof. I have the appraisal documents. I have recordings of our phone conversations where she lied about the value. I'd started recording our calls after the first few voicemails. Patricia had advised it. Washington was a two-party consent state, but Claire had called me first and I could argue I was documenting harassment." Aunt Linda sighed. "Even if there was some miscommunication about the value, is it really worth destroying your relationship with your sister? Over money? Your mother would be heartbroken to see you two fighting like this." And there it was. The emotional manipulation. The guilt trip. Of course Mom would be heartbroken, but not because I was standing up for myself. She'd be heartbroken because her daughter had become someone who'd steal from her own sister. "Aunt Linda, I love you, but you don't understand what happened here. Claire didn't make a mistake. She deliberately tried to cheat me. And I'm not going to pretend that's okay just to keep the peace." "I think you're being very stubborn," Aunt Linda said, her voice cooling, "and very selfish. Claire needs support right now. David's business is struggling. They have bills to pay. You have a good job. You don't need that money like they do." I almost laughed. "So because I work hard and live within my means, I should just let them steal from me? That's your advice? I'm saying that family is more important than money. But clearly you don't agree." She hung up before I could respond. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Claire had gotten to Aunt Linda first. She was probably getting to other family members too, spinning her version of events, painting me as the villain in this story, and maybe some of them would believe her. Maybe a lot of them would, because that's how these things worked, right? The person who told their story first, who cried the most, who played the victim the best, that's who people believed. I couldn't compete with that. I didn't have Claire's gift for manipulation. I didn't know how to cry on command or make myself seem sympathetic while I was actively stealing from someone. All I had was the truth. And sometimes, the truth wasn't enough. Patricia filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent any sale of the property. The hearing was set for 2 weeks away. In the meantime, I had to keep going to work, keep pretending everything was normal, keep functioning while my entire world fell apart. My coworkers noticed something was wrong, of course. I'd always been good at my job, but suddenly I was making mistakes, forgetting to chart medications, snapping at patients, nearly mixing up 2 patients' files because I was so distracted. My supervisor, Karen, pulled me aside one day after my shift. "Amber, what's going on?" "This isn't like you." I almost told her everything. Almost broke down right there in the hospital corridor and spilled the whole sordid story. But I caught myself, Family stuff, I said. I'm dealing with some family stuff. I'm sorry. I'll do better. Karen studied me for a long moment. Do you need time off? Because I can arrange— No, I said quickly. No, I need to work. Working helps. It keeps me grounded. That was a lie. Working didn't help. Nothing helped. But I needed the money. I needed the distraction. I needed to feel like some part of my life was still normal. Karen nodded slowly. Okay, but Amber? If you need to talk, I'm here. And if you need professional help, a therapist, a counselor, the hospital has resources. Don't try to carry this alone. I thanked her and went home, where I spent another sleepless night staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about everything I'd lost. It wasn't just the money, though God knew that was significant. $2 million would have changed my life. Paid off my debts. Let me buy a house. Maybe even let me cut back my hours at the hospital, avoid the burnout that was eating me alive. But more than the money, I'd lost my sister. I'd lost the person who was supposed to be my best friend, my ally, the only family I had left. And I didn't know if I'd ever get her back. Did I even want her back? Could I ever trust her again after this? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. The hearing arrived faster than I expected and slower than I wanted, all at once. Patricia and I arrived at the courthouse early. She'd prepped me extensively on what to expect, how to behave, what to say if the judge asked me questions directly. Stay calm, she'd instructed. Don't let emotion take over. Stick to the facts. You have the truth on your side, but only if you present it clearly. Claire was already there when we entered the courtroom. Sitting next to her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast. David was there too, sitting one row behind them, his expression unreadable. My sister looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones too sharp in her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she kept twisting a tissue in her hands. When she saw me, she looked away quickly, but not before I caught the expression on her face. It wasn't guilt. It was resentment. She was angry at me. After everything she'd done, she was actually angry at me for not just rolling over and letting her steal from me. The hearing was shorter than I expected. Patricia presented the evidence, the real appraisal. The recordings of Claire's phone calls where she'd lied about the value. The timeline showing that they'd had the appraisal months before approaching me about selling. She laid it out systematically, professionally, devastatingly. Claire's lawyer tried to argue that it had been a misunderstanding, that Claire had been given bad information by David's colleague, that there had been no intentional deception. But her arguments fell flat against the weight of evidence Patricia had assembled. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, listened to everything with an impassive expression. Then she made her ruling. "I'm granting the temporary restraining order," she said. "No sale of the property in question will proceed until this matter is fully adjudicated. Additionally, I'm ordering both parties to participate in mediation to see if this can be resolved without a full trial. Mediation. Great. That meant I'd have to sit in a room with Claire and David and try to work things out, like reasonable adults. Like they hadn't tried to rob me. Like we could just talk through this and come to some kind of agreement, but it was better than nothing. At least the cottage was safe for now. At least they couldn't sell it out from under me while we figured this out. As we left the courtroom, I felt Claire's eyes on me. I turned, and our gazes met for the first time in weeks. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something in her face that might have been regret. Might have been sorrow. But then David leaned over and whispered something to her, and her expression hardened again. We looked away from each other at the same time. The mediation was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I tried to get my life back to some semblance of normal. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for the cases no one else wanted. Anything to keep busy, anything to avoid thinking, but I couldn't avoid it forever. One night, about a week before the mediation, I was working a late shift in the ER when a family came in, a mother and 2 daughters. The younger daughter, maybe 16, had broken her arm in a skateboarding accident. Nothing serious, but painful. While we were getting her set up for x-rays, I overheard the older sister talking to their mother. "I told her not to try that trick," the older sister was saying. "I told her she wasn't ready. But does she ever listen to me? No, and now look." The younger sister rolled her eyes. "Oh, shut up, Emma. You're not my boss." "No, but I'm your sister, and I actually care about you not breaking your bones like an idiot." "Whatever." "You're just mad because I'm braver than you." They bickered back and forth, and their mother just shook her head with a fond, exasperated smile. "You two," she said. "Always fighting. But I know you'd do anything for each other." Something about that made my chest tighten painfully. I excused myself and went to the bathroom where I stood at the sink and tried not to cry. That's what sisters were supposed to be. Two people who fought sometimes, but who fundamentally had each other's backs. Who would do anything for each other? Claire and I had been like that once. I remembered when I was in high school and a boy had broken my heart. Claire had stayed up with me all night, bringing me ice cream and bad-mouthing him and making me laugh through my tears. I remembered when Claire had her first car accident, minor, but scary, and I'd driven 2 hours to be there with her while she dealt with the insurance company. When had that changed? When had money become more important than our bond? When had David's influence turned my sister into someone I didn't recognize? Or maybe, and this was the thought that haunted me, maybe I'd never really known her at all. Maybe this capacity for betrayal had always been inside her, and it had just taken the right circumstances to bring it out. I splashed cold water on my face and went back to work. There was nothing to be gained by dwelling on it. I had to focus on the mediation, on protecting my rights, on making sure I didn't lose everything Mom had left me. But God, I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being angry. Tired of mourning a relationship that might already be dead. The night before the mediation, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, watching the shadows move across my ceiling, thinking about what I would say when I saw Claire again. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to rage about the betrayal, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, just wanted to understand. Wanted to ask her why. Why she'd done this. Why I wasn't worth more to her than money. Why our mother's dying wish hadn't mattered enough to stop her. Around 3 a.m., I got up and made tea. I sat at my small kitchen table and pulled out the box of photos I kept in the closet, pictures from our childhood. Claire and me at the cottage building sandcastles. Claire and me on Christmas morning, matching pajamas and gap-toothed smiles. Claire and me at Mom's bedside in the hospital, holding hands while we tried to be brave. We'd been so close. We'd been everything to each other after Dad died. And when Mom got sick, we'd made all those promises. We'd always take care of each other. We'd always be there. No matter what, Claire had broken those promises. She'd shattered them beyond repair, unless there was something I didn't know. Some reason, some explanation that could make this make sense. I didn't want to hope for that. Hope felt dangerous right now, like something that would only lead to more pain. But I couldn't quite kill it either. Maybe tomorrow, at the mediation, I'd finally get answers. Maybe tomorrow I'd understand how we'd ended up here. Two sisters on opposite sides of a legal battle, fighting over the one thing we should have been protecting together. Maybe tomorrow would bring some kind of resolution, some kind of peace, or maybe tomorrow would only make everything worse. I didn't know which possibility scared me more. The mediation office was nothing like a courtroom. It was deliberately designed to feel less threatening. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged around a large wooden table, landscape paintings on the walls that were probably meant to be calming. But none of it helped. My heart was still racing. My palms were still sweating. Patricia sat beside me, her briefcase open, documents neatly organized. Across the table, Claire's lawyer, Ms. Brennan, was arranging her own papers. David was there too, sitting next to Claire, his hand possessively on her shoulder. And Claire? Claire looked even worse than she had at the hearing. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. She still wouldn't look at me. The mediator arrived a few minutes later, a gray-haired man named Robert Chen, who introduced himself with a practiced, calm demeanor. He explained how the process would work, how we'd each have a chance to speak, how the goal was to find a resolution that worked for everyone. "I want to remind you all," he said, "that what's said in this room is confidential. This is a safe space to be honest, to express your feelings and to work toward understanding. My role isn't to determine who's right or wrong. It's to help you find common ground. Safe space. Right." I was sitting across from the sister who'd tried to rob me, and I was supposed to feel safe. But I nodded anyway. We all did. And then the mediation began. Patricia spoke first, laying out our position clearly and factually. The property was worth $3.9 million. Claire and David had attempted to fraudulently convince me to sell my half for $6,000. We had evidence of their deception. We were seeking to either maintain joint ownership under fair terms or have Claire buy out my half at fair market value, $1.95 million, Ms. Brennan countered with their version. Claire had received bad information about the property value from one of David's business associates. When she'd approached me about selling, she'd genuinely believed the cottage was only worth $12,000. There had been no intentional deception. The real appraisal had been conducted after those initial conversations, and Claire had simply not had a chance to inform me of the updated value before I'd discovered it and jumped to conclusions. It was such an obvious lie that I almost laughed. But Robert Chen just nodded, taking notes, his expression carefully neutral. "I see," he said when Ms. Brennan finished. "And do you have documentation showing when this second appraisal was conducted?" Ms. Brennan hesitated. "The documentation is, we're still gathering that information, because it didn't exist. The appraisal I'd found was dated 2 months before Claire first called me about selling. There was no updated appraisal. There was no innocent explanation." "Perhaps," Robert said carefully, "we should hear directly from the parties involved. Claire, would you like to share your perspective?" Claire finally looked up. Her eyes met mine for the first time since we'd sat down, and I saw so many emotions there: fear, anger, guilt, desperation. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. David's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Claire, we discussed what you should say." "I know what we discussed," she snapped, shrugging his hand off. She turned back to me, and now there were tears streaming down her face. "Amber, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me." "Then tell me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "Tell me what really happened. No lawyers, no scripts. Just you and me. Tell me why." Ms. Brennan started to object, but Robert held up a hand. "Let her speak." Claire took a shaky breath. "David's business? It's not just struggling. It's failing. He has debts. Serious debts. We have creditors calling every day. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose everything." She wiped at her tears, smearing her mascara. "He said if we could just get the cottage sold quickly, we could pay off enough of the debt to save the business. He said it would save us." "So you decided to cheat me?" I asked. "No. I mean," she looked at David, then back at me. "David said the cottage wasn't worth much. He showed me an estimate from someone he knew, someone in real estate. It said $12,000. I believed him. What about the real appraisal?" I demanded. "The one from Wallace & Associates? The one I found at the cottage? That was dated 2 months before you called me, Claire." 2 months. You had to have known." Claire's face crumpled. "I saw it after I'd already talked to you. After I'd already told you $12,000. David said it was a mistake, that the Wallace appraisal was wrong, that his contact was more reliable. He said," her voice broke. "He said if I told you the truth, you'd never agree to sell, and we'd lose everything. Our home, our life, everything." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "So you knew. You knew the real value and you lied to me anyway." "I was scared," Claire sobbed. "I was terrified. David was talking about bankruptcy, about losing the house. He was so stressed, Amber. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. I thought he might—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I thought I might lose him. And I panicked. I made a terrible choice. I know that now. I know. You weren't going to tell me, I said, my voice flat. Even after it sold. Even after you had the money. You were never going to tell me what you'd done. Claire didn't answer. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking. David finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. You want to know the truth, Amber? The truth is that Cottage has been a drain on both of you for years. Neither of you used it. Neither of you could afford to maintain it. All I did was try to find a solution that would benefit everyone. If you just sold your half like Claire asked, we could have invested the money, made it grow. You'd have ended up with more than $6,000. But you had to be stubborn. You had to— David, Ms. Brennan said sharply. Stop talking, but he didn't stop. He was on a roll now, his face flushed with anger. You've always been jealous of Claire. Always resented that she found someone successful, that she had a nice house and a good life. You couldn't stand that she was happy, so you— Shut up! The shout came from Claire. She was standing now, her hands balled into fists. Just shut up, David. Stop making this worse. Everyone froze. Even Robert Chen looked shocked. Claire turned to her lawyer. Ms. Brennan, I need to speak to my husband. Alone. Right now. Claire, I don't think that's— David started. Now! Claire's voice cracked like a whip. Ms. Brennan looked at Robert, who nodded. Let's take a 15-minute break. Claire and David, you can use the office down the hall. Amber, you and Ms. Gomez can stay here or step out for some air. Claire practically dragged David out of the room. The door closed behind them, and immediately we could hear raised voices from down the hall. The words were muffled, but the anger was clear. Patricia turned to me. Are you okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was true. My hands were shaking. What just happened? I think, Patricia said carefully, your sister is starting to realize the position her husband put her in. And I think she's not happy about it. The 15 minutes stretched to 20, then 30. Finally, the door opened and Claire came back in, alone. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face blotchy from crying. But there was something different about her expression now. Something harder. Where's David? Ms. Brennan asked. He left, Claire said flatly. He's not part of this discussion anymore. She sat down across from me and looked me directly in the eyes. Amber, I need to tell you everything. The real truth. All of it. Ms. Brennan started to object again, but Claire held up a hand. I'm done lying. I'm done covering for him. I'm done letting him destroy what's left of my relationship with my sister. She turned to her lawyer. If that means you quit, fine. If it means I'm admitting to fraud, fine. I don't care anymore. I just need my sister to understand what happened. My heart was pounding. Okay, I'm listening. Claire took a deep breath. David's business isn't just failing. He made some really bad investments. Risky deals that went south. He owes money to people, not just banks, Amber. Dangerous people. People who've been making threats. My blood ran cold. What kind of threats? The kind that made me scared to sleep at night, Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. A few months ago, someone slashed our tires, left a note on our windshield. Then someone broke into David's office and trashed it. The police couldn't do anything. David said they were just trying to scare him into paying up faster, but— She wrapped her arms around herself. I was terrified. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Claire, if you were in danger— Because David made me promise not to. He said he could handle it. He said if he could just get enough money together, he could pay them off, and everything would be fine. That's when he started talking about the cottage. She laughed bitterly. At first, he said we should sell it the normal way. List it, get fair market value, split it with you. But that would take months, maybe years. He said we didn't have that kind of time. So he came up with the plan to lie to me, I said. Claire nodded miserably. He got that fake appraisal from some guy he knew. I don't even know if the guy was actually a real appraiser. He showed it to me and said this was our chance. If we could convince you to sell quick for cheap, we could turn around and sell it to a developer he knew for the real value. Keep your $6,000, pay off the debts with the rest, and you'd never have to know. And you agreed to this. I was scared. Claire's voice rose. I was so scared, Amber. These weren't normal creditors. These were people who could hurt us, hurt me. And David kept saying it was our only option, that you'd never find out, that it wasn't really stealing because we were in a crisis situation. She broke off, shaking her head. I know how it sounds. I know, there's no excuse. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was drowning, and he threw me a life raft, and I grabbed it without thinking about who I'd be pulling under with me. The room was silent except for Claire's ragged breathing. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for her. She'd been scared, manipulated by her husband, backed into a corner. But another part of me was still angry. Still hurt. You knew it was wrong, I said quietly. When you called me that first time. When you lied about the appraisal. You knew. I knew, Claire admitted. And I hated myself for it. Every time I talked to you, every time I lied, I felt sick. But I kept telling myself it was temporary. That once the debt was paid, once we were safe, I'd make it up to you somehow. She laughed bitterly. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Send you anonymous money? There was no making it right. I know that now. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why not keep lying? Your lawyer was doing a pretty good job of spinning the story. Claire looked at me with such raw pain that it made my chest ache. Because David just tried to throw me under the bus completely. Out in that hallway, he told me I needed to take full responsibility. Say it was all my idea, that I manipulated you, that he didn't know anything about the real appraisal. He wanted me to lie under oath if it came to that. He wanted me to go to jail to protect him. Her voice hardened, and in that moment I realized something. He doesn't love me. He never loved me. He just saw me as another asset to exploit. Just like the cottage. Tears were streaming down my face now, too. Claire, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Amber. I betrayed you. I betrayed Mom's memory. I betrayed everything we were supposed to be to each other. And I don't know if you can ever forgive me. But I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was lying to you, even when I was hurting you, you were still my sister. You were still the person I loved most in the world. I lost my way. I let fear turn me into someone I don't recognize. I sat there, emotions warring inside me. Anger, hurt, grief. But also, something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Robert Chen cleared his throat gently. Amber, would you like to respond? I wiped my eyes, trying to find the right words. I don't know if I can forgive you right now. What you did? Claire, you tried to steal $2 million from me. You lied to my face repeatedly. You let David convince you to betray your own sister. I paused, my voice shaking. But I believe that you were scared. I believe that David manipulated you, and I believe that you're sorry. I am, Claire whispered. I am so sorry. Here's what I need, I said, and my voice was stronger now. I need you to be completely honest from this point forward. No more lies. No more covering for David. If there are other things I don't know, you tell me now. Everything. Claire nodded frantically. There's something else. The buyer. The person David said wanted to buy the cottage for $12,000. That was fake. He was going to buy it himself through an LLC, then immediately flip it to a real developer for the full value. He would have kept almost all the money. I would have seen maybe a few $100,000 after the debts were paid. You would have gotten nothing. The audacity of it took my breath away. He was going to steal from both of us. Yes, Claire said. And I was too stupid and too scared to see it until now. Patricia had been quiet through all of this, but now she leaned forward. Claire, I need to ask, are you willing to testify to all of this if necessary? Are you willing to provide documentation of David's debts, his threats, his plan? Claire looked at her lawyer, who looked deeply uncomfortable but finally nodded slightly. Claire turned back to Patricia. Yes, I'll testify. I'll give you everything I have. Bank statements, emails, text messages with David's associates. All of it. That will likely mean the end of your marriage, Patricia said bluntly. My marriage ended the moment David asked me to destroy my relationship with my sister for his debts, Claire said. I just didn't realize it until today. Robert Chen looked between us. So, where does this leave us in terms of the property? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. This was where I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. What kind of sister? I want to keep the cottage, I said. It's important to me. It's Mom's legacy, but… I looked at Claire. I know you need money, so here's what I'm proposing. We get the property officially appraised by a neutral third party. We sell it at fair market value. We split the proceeds 50-50, like it should have been from the start. No tricks, no lies. Just fair. Claire's eyes widened. You'd do that? After everything? On one condition, I said. Your half of the money goes into a trust. Not to David, not toward his debts. Into a trust that you control, that he can't touch. You use it to get yourself out of this situation safely. Hire a good divorce lawyer. Find a safe place to live. Whatever you need. But David doesn't see a penny of it. I can help set that up, Patricia said quietly. Claire was crying again, but these tears were different. You'd help me? Even after what I did? You're still my sister, I said, and I realized as I said it that it was true. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the hurt, she was still Claire. Still the girl who'd stayed up all night with me when my heart was broken. Still the person who'd held my hand at Mom's funeral. I'm not saying I'm not angry. I'm furious, and I'm hurt, and it's going to take a long time before I can fully trust you again. But I don't want to lose you over this. Mom wouldn't have wanted that. Claire stood up and walked around the table. I stood too, uncertain. And then she threw her arms around me and held on like I was the only thing keeping her afloat. I'll make this right, she whispered against my shoulder. I swear to you, Amber, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. I hugged her back, and it felt like coming home after a long, terrible journey. It wasn't fixed, not by a long shot. There was still so much damage, so much hurt to work through. But it was a start. The next few months were a whirlwind. The property was appraised by a neutral company. They valued it at $4.1 million, even higher than the original Wallace appraisal. The real estate market in the San Juans had continued to climb. We listed it with a reputable agent. It sold in 3 weeks to a tech CEO from Seattle who wanted a weekend retreat. The final sale price was $4.3 million. After fees and taxes, Claire and I each walked away with just over $2 million. True to her word, Claire put her share in a trust that David couldn't access. She also filed for divorce. It was ugly. David fought her every step of the way, trying to claim he was entitled to half of her inheritance. But Patricia connected Claire with an excellent family law attorney who was able to protect her assets. It turned out that David's debts were even worse than Claire had described. The dangerous people he owed money to were actually associates in a real estate fraud scheme that was under federal investigation. When David's connection to them came to light, he ended up facing criminal charges himself. Last I heard, he'd taken a plea deal and was serving 18 months in federal prison. Claire moved into a small apartment not far from mine. We started having coffee together every week. At first, the conversations were stilted, careful. We were like strangers learning to be sisters again. But gradually, slowly, we found our way back to each other. She started therapy to work through everything that had happened. The manipulation, the abuse, the trauma of her marriage. She got a job at a nonprofit, something completely different from David's world. She seemed lighter somehow. Freer. As for me, I used my share of the money to pay off all my debts. Student loans, medical bills, everything. For the first time in my adult life, I was debt-free. I also bought a small house. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. A real home, not just an apartment I was renting, and I did one more thing. I took some of the money and I bought a small cottage. Not in the San Juans, that would have been too painful, but on a lake about an hour outside Seattle. A place where I could go on weekends, where I could sit by the water and think about Mom. I planted roses there, Mom's favorite kind. And every time I visited, I felt her presence. Not sad or angry, but peaceful. Like she was telling me I'd done the right thing. It was almost a year after the mediation when Claire and I drove up to the San Juans together. We parked on the road near where our old cottage had been. We weren't trespassing, just looking from a distance. The new owner had already started renovations. The old cottage was gone, replaced by a modern structure with huge windows and clean lines. It was beautiful in its own way, but it wasn't ours anymore. "Do you regret it?" Claire asked quietly. "Selling it?" "I thought about that. Sometimes," I admitted. "But keeping it would have meant losing you. And I couldn't do that." Claire reached over and took my hand. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," I said, but I smiled. "But you're stuck with me anyway. That's what sisters are." We sat there for a while, watching the sun set over the water, remembering everything that place had meant to us. And then we drove home together, to our new lives, our new understanding. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when this all started. It wasn't the fairy tale reconciliation where everything went back to normal. Too much had happened for that. Too much had broken, but it was real. It was honest, and it was ours. 6 months after that, I got a call from Patricia. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "David's associates are all going to trial. Federal prosecutors are building a massive case against the whole fraud ring. Apparently your case, what David tried to do with the cottage, helped them establish a pattern of behavior." "So something good came out of this mess," I said. "More than something," Patricia replied. "The prosecutor wanted me to tell you that your willingness to document everything, to preserve evidence, helped them take down some really bad people. People who were hurting a lot of families." After we hung up, I sat with that for a while. It didn't erase what had happened. It didn't undo the betrayal or the pain. But it meant something. It meant that standing up for myself, refusing to be a victim, had mattered. That evening, Claire came over for dinner. It had become our tradition. Every Friday night, one of us cooked for the other. We'd talk about our weeks, about our lives, about everything except the past. We were building something new, brick by brick. I heard from Patricia, I told her as we ate. "About David's case," Claire nodded. She didn't like talking about David, but she didn't shy away from it either. "Good. I hope they throw the book at him. How are you doing?" I asked. "Really?" She considered the question seriously. "Better than I have any right to be. My therapist says I'm making progress, and I have you back." "That's—" her voice caught. "That's everything, Amber." "You never really lost me," I said. "I was angry. I was hurt. But you never lost me?" "I almost did, though," Claire said quietly. "And I think about that every day. How close I came to destroying the most important relationship in my life over money, over fear, over a man who never really loved me." She looked at me with those eyes that were so much like Mom's. "I won't ever take you for granted again." "I promise." "Good," I said. "Because I won't let you. We're going to talk about things now. Really talk. No more secrets." "No more lies." "No more secrets," Claire agreed. "No more lies." We clinked our glasses together, just water, nothing fancy. But it felt like a vow. A new beginning. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not keeping the cottage. If I wish I'd found a way to buy out Claire's half and hold on to it forever. The honest answer is, sometimes. Sometimes I drive past a lake or see a sunset over water, and I ache for that place. For the memories it held. For the connection to Mom and Dad and everything we used to be. But then I think about what I gained instead. I got my sister back. Not the same sister. We're both different now, changed by what we went through. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we needed to break a little so we could rebuild stronger. I learned that family isn't about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes or never hurting each other. It's about choosing, again and again, to show up. To be honest, to do the hard work of forgiveness and reconciliation. I learned that money can reveal people's true characters, but it can also reveal their capacity for change. Claire made a terrible choice, but she owned it. She faced the consequences. She did the work to become someone better. And I learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. It would have been easier to cut Claire out of my life completely, to take my money and never speak to her again. Part of me wanted to, but that wasn't who I wanted to be. That wasn't the person Mom raised me to be. Mom used to say that family was like a garden. You had to tend it, weed it, nurture it. Sometimes you had to cut away dead branches to help the healthy parts grow. But you never gave up on it completely. I didn't give up on Claire. And she didn't give up on herself. That's worth more than any cottage. More than any amount of money. That's worth everything. 2 years after the mediation, I was at my little lake cottage when I heard a car pull up. It was Claire, and she wasn't alone. She had someone with her, a woman about our age with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Amber, this is Rachel," Claire said, and there was a shy happiness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "My girlfriend." We all had dinner together that night on my little porch overlooking the water. Claire and Rachel told me how they'd met at the nonprofit where Claire worked. How they'd started as friends and slowly become more. How Rachel had helped Claire heal and trust again. As I watched them together, the way they looked at each other, the gentle touches, the inside jokes, I felt something settle in my chest. This was what Claire deserved. Not David's manipulation and lies. Not fear and desperation. But this. Real love. Real partnership. Real happiness. After Rachel went to bed in the guest room, Claire and I stayed up late by the fire, like we used to do at the old cottage. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing past the worst thing I ever did and remembering who I really was. Who I could be again." She poked at the fire with a stick. "I don't know if I would have been strong enough to do the same." "Yes, you would have," I said. "You just forgot for a while. But you found your way back." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance. And I thought about Mom, about her promise to keep the cottage and the family. Technically, I'd broken that promise. The cottage was gone, sold to a stranger. But the family, the real family, the thing that mattered, we'd saved that. We'd fought for it. We'd refused to let money and fear and betrayal destroy it completely. Maybe that was what Mom really wanted all along. Not the property itself, but what it represented. Connection. Love. The bond between sisters that could survive even the worst storms. We'd lost the cottage, but we'd kept each other, and in the end, that was enough. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of your own family struggles, or made you think about forgiveness and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real, emotional stories. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to forgive someone who betrayed you? How did you find your way back to trust? Drop your story in the comments below. Your words might help someone else who's going through something similar. Remember, family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being honest, and doing the hard work of loving each other even when it's difficult. Even when it hurts. Because in the end, the people who truly matter, they're worth fighting for. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And take care of each other.